everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm gonna go through my Minimal Techno Ableton template. This template has been made during my live stream session, so you can see the whole process from scratch on my other YouTube channel called Audio React. But yeah, today we're gonna talk about more sound design and composition, why I made each track, how it's been made, what role it plays, and then next week we will focus more on the arrangement, mixing and mastering. Alright, let's have a listen and let's dig into it. Alright, so that gives you an idea. This template have been heavily inspired by Maxim's Dark and Senso Sounds label. So let's start with each track. So first track is a sidechain. It's just a 909 clap. It's a trigger I use for all of my sidechain compression. I have a fast trigger which is gonna bring down the volume very quick on my compressor. Then I have the kick. So for this type of kick, I wanted kind of a 808, a little bit sounding kick. So I use a sample. This is like this is like a kick drum from my subsequent 37 bank. And I just add a bit of saturation just to kind of boost a little bit an EQ. So I really boost, I cut everything under 42 Hertz and I boost as well in the same time. And then I remove around 200 and 600. Sorry. It's just make the kick a little bit less muddy. And then slightly boost here, which is kind of a bit more clicky. And then I use drum bass. So drum bass in solo, it doesn't really make, you're gonna hear, it's kind of looking like it's hurting your kick more than really helping. And obviously drum bass has its own color. What I've done here, I've compressed and it's in medium and I add a bit of boom. But if you listen into the mix, you're gonna see that it's actually helping. So honestly, when I listen in solo, I prefer without the drum bass, but inside the track, got a bit more body, it's a bit more, add a bit more presence to your kick. Now let's jump into the hat. So I've used my Dear Hats rack. I will put it in the description if you want to find it. It's basically a drum rack preset I made where I can just load my sample and quickly program a drum pattern. So here what I've done for the whole track, I've layered two hats. So you have one playing on the beat and one off beat. If you compare to your kick. So you have one close-eye hat. So you can see there is no really process on the hats like by themselves. Then you have the open hat with a bit of attack, so it's kind of this shaker bit effect. And they have both sent into this reverb return. And then you have a drum bass as overall process. So I've used this technique a lot in this track. It's more kind of a mixing, but I can talk about it today. The idea with this kind of track is like you have to be very surgical with your sound. And one of the main things that can mess up your mix is having a long reverb tail. And I like the drum bass because you have this transient which is kind of acting like a gate. And basically what it will do, it will reduce the tail of your reverb. So if I remove the transient, you're gonna see. You see like I have this long reverb tail, and I shorten it, but I still have the feeling of a large room. So you basically get the best of both worlds. You have a feeling of a large room, but without having the long tail, we can mess your mix. And then after, I usually add always a bit of drive and crunch. This really depends, it's per element, because sometimes it adds a bit of color, but can be weird a little bit sometimes. So that's really depend of each element. And then I compress as well just to make things a bit more compact. And same again in the mix, is kind of makes things a bit more precise, tighter. And like I said, I want this surgical kind of feeling for this track, so that's why I've used this on almost, you're gonna see on almost every track I've used. You can see how it's redefined really well your hat, and it's more precise, it gets through the mix better. Now second hat, I think I've used the one from the 808 original core kit. So basically the samples are with Ableton by default. Here they're just playing off beat, so compared to your kick. And they are playing both together. Again, no external processing, but just like some group processing. And you can see here just EQ. Just to get rid a little bit of the low mids. Delay to add a bit of groove. You see with the delay at 2 and a bit of dry wet, you have this dun 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 kind of effect which give a bit more groove. Bit of reverb, and exactly the same drum bass. So you might ask why I don't just bring down the decay of the reverb, or probably a bit less diffuse to make it less dense. But when you do that, you kind of lose the feeling of your reverb, the large room feeling, or you lose the color. So I rather to have this and then after play with the drum bass. But again, like depending what you're looking after, you might prefer to have this hat without the drum bass. I kind of like it, to be honest. But for this specific type of track, I know that I need something more sharp and it's really depends what you're looking after. There is no right or wrong way to do that, but that's one thing I like to do when I need surgical sound. I like to use the transient negatively. You can use the gate as well after your reverb, but I like to use drum bass because I can add a bit of drive, crunch, can compress everything. I mean, like it adds some color as well. So yeah. Then we have the snare. So the snare, it's a layer snare. You can see you have 3 snare, and none of them really play like exactly quantized. If I play them all together, it's different feeling, and it's even more pronounced when you play with the kick. So first one we play all quantized to the beat, and the second one we play a little bit delayed. You see, it's adds a bit of bite to your snare. So then how I layer my snare is that I don't really have techniques. You just have to find original snare or clap you like and try to layer them, pitch them differently. Here I haven't done much process. I just pitch the first one summit on upper, and then after I just add saturator in hard curve to give a bit more bite. Reverb, but here I use the gate drum technique, so like this you can see both technique. It's using a gate basically to reduce the tail of the reverb. You can see how it shut down this tail here, like how it's been shot and shortened, and yeah, that's worked perfect. So far we have our drum. I add a clap roll as well. It's just a classic 808 clap. I think it's as well from the default 808 kit core from Ableton, with just a bit of reverb, and I have a velocity automation, so this way it rises during the break. It starts very low and get louder and louder. Nothing crazy about that. Now let's talk about our bass section. Divided in two, you have bass low and high, which are my kind of groovy, plucky bass line, which will sound like this. And then you have more like a drone, which is more like a steady bass, playing the whole track. Alright, so the bass goes like this. First I started with the bass high, and the idea for the bass, you know, was this having this kind of really moving bass line, and playing with the filter, it was really important. if I show you the automation, you can see there is obviously one thing that's done as well is always playing D sharp, and then I go +1 and then +3, which is third. So, and then the way you open your filter is really what's gonna give the groove and the movement. That's just I play live with the push and record the automation. But yeah, to make this kind of sound, the main element is the unison here. You're gonna see if I remove, and then a great technique is basically kind of super saw sound with the detune. So you need basically to have like saw waveform. So then you can experiment with different kind of saw waveform. You don't need to stay with the classic one. Then after it depends what type of sound you're looking for. And then they're playing a different octave. This one is more in the high. This one is more in the mid-low. And then everything is going through a 24 dB low pass filter, Moog Prodigy style. And you can hear it's kind of a plucky sound, so I apply a bit of envelope on the filter, so something quite plucky. If I remove the envelope, completely different sound. You need to put it in mono as well. It's always sound a little bit different and better in my opinion in mono. And yeah, then after it's all about automation. So you can see most of the time I was opening the filter when there is this higher note, or sometimes a little bit before. But yeah, this is something like just play live, have fun with. Then this is some sidechain compression, like bit of reverb. This EQ is just a low pass filter that I use at the intro to kind of introduce the sound, and at the outro as well to kind of fade it out. Then I put the bass in mono, a bit of EQ. So for this sound, I didn't really want it to have a too heavy low end, so I've kind of cut a little bit the low frequency of the bass. Even though this one is bass high, so the purpose of this bass, basically if I have bass high and bass low, one is more like for the subby part, and one is more for like kind of a synth part, let's say, like it's your bass sound but act like a synth that you modulate, and with more presence in the mid and high frequency. That's why it's bass high. And then I use drum bus, I compress a little bit everything, medium mode, and I reduce again the reverb. So then I have bass low, which is exactly playing the same pattern. And here I just have a classic sawtooth. Again, the unison detune mode in mono, very important. I still have this plucky sound here with the same type of filter. It's basically the same type of sound, it's just like this time I use just one oscillator with just a classic sawtooth. And you can see the process is very simple, just sidechain compression again, bass in mono, and then I read. Here again, you see I get rid of this frequency here even, because if I leave this subby frequency, then it gets too subby. So depending again what you are looking for, maybe you want this very subby bass, but I wanted something more like a tight bass line and a tight sound, so that's why I cut it that much. Again, it really depends what you are looking after. And then I obviously heavily low pass everything because I wanted to just focus on the low and then together. Alright, and then I wanted this long steady drone sound. This is nice to add tension, to add a bit of texture as well, to kind of glue together your track. There is multiple purpose. And the way to create this type of sound is exactly the same way than before. It's mainly using unison and having this very spread sound. So if I remove the unison, you can still hear some detune, and you can see like both oscillators are detune. That's helping. The waveform, I use two oscillators. So one is like saw plus width, like I said, slow, and even pulse working well for this kind of sound. Here I use more like kind of a pulse, but again, it's no rules, just depend what you like. Just experiment with the different wavetable. But yeah, keep in mind detuning and unison, very important. Here again in mono, and I have again low pass filter, 24 dB, Moog Prodigy style, bit more drive. amp, usually I like to use it with this kind of super sound because it adds an extra buzziness. So here it's very low pass, so you hear it less, but more cut in the low and the high. Sidechain. Saturator to make things louder. Bit of reverb. And then make it stereo, so this way our main bass is more in the middle, the bass high and bass low in the middle, and the drone are more like in the side, where they don't really overclash too much. And then you have a similar type of sound, but this time in the high. So this is really tricky to do because for this kind of sound, you want something more in the high, but you don't want something too bright, but you want still something which is clear, which is quite hard to achieve. And for this one, I use one of my rack, which is called Transilite Modern. And it's basically the same idea than what I've just shown you before. I use like Sawtooth waveform. You see that I detune oscillator. Here I use the OB6 shapes. Again, going through a low pass filter, 24 dB Prodigy, and I use the Unison. Then there is some processing. If you want to find out more about this rack, I will put it in the description. It's available for free. Then what you have, the detune sound, sidechain, heavily EQ to get this mid sound, bit of reverb, EQ, and then to make it stereo and make sure your bass is in mono. And this add, and especially it's very useful at the beginning, that where your track can sound a bit weak and empty, it can really fill up the blank. And yeah, that's it for our bass part. When I created the track, I have more or less this idea to have a tight drum, very surgical, with this kind of very evolving shuffling bass, moving a lot like this. And I knew that I would need some synth on top of that, like coming here and there, playing. And that's what I've done with all of the synth. And there is quite a lot, but it's to add some variation to your track. You don't want always the same synth playing at exactly the same time. So we have the first one, which is sounding like this. And it's kind of an arpeggiator, but synth. And it's played D sharp, and then D sharp an octave upper, and with one semitone as well. So you get this kind of weird out of tune feeling. So the sound itself, again, unison very important. Like for this type of sound, you need to use unison all the time almost. Again, I use the pulse waveform, which is more kind of a square. 24 dB low pass filter, a lot of drive, which is gonna give this bite to your sound. And here again, you want to bring down your filter to then open it very fastly with an envelope, so that's what gave this plucky sound. Otherwise, it's a very steady sound, but if you apply an envelope with no sustain, very short decay to have this plucky sound. And I add a bit of FM as well for this one. So when you got that, you want to process it. I just like EQ more or less. Sometimes you might wonder why I have two EQ as well, because probably I start with this EQ and then I add some delay and I just to add a bit of movement, and I say, okay, actually I need another EQ where I boost a lot the mid-high. Because you have already a lot of element in the low. I try to don't surcharge it, so that's quite a bit tricky because obviously they are kind of bassy sound as well, so you have to just see. But here I emphasis here, so it's more like a high sound, brighter sound. Bit of the convolution reverb, and now you have the drum bass, which like I think I use on almost every track, like I said. And second synth, which is quite an interesting one. So here you can see you have again D sharp, And then you have E, which is like just one semitone again upper from your root here. And here the trick, you can hear you have a very long glide effect. It's very long pitch effect, so your sounds go up in pitch and then go back down. And the way to do that is to have you glide very long. If I reduce the glide, for example, to just 30 milliseconds, you don't have the same effect, but having a long glide is taking the time to have a nice pitch up and down. So then for how do I know which kind of synth I wanted to create, because you can see I have 6 different, it was mainly experimenting. You know, I know I wanted some type of synth, maybe some more like a lead, maybe some more percussive. So the first one was more like a percussive synth. This one is more like a lead. I know that I will have some kind of synth horn, classic brassy sound, like cinematic feeling as well I will add. I will have maybe some growling where you play with the filter, but it's all about experimenting, trying to find something, trying to do something I haven't done before. And this is the perfect example. I've never really done this kind of glidey synth, and you can see I play with the unison as well, which then I have different variation, and you can see how it really changed the sound. Here I use kind of almost sawtooth waveform, but here again, and if I remove the unison and the glide, basic sound, and the fact that I automate the amount of unison is accelerate the excitement. Rather than if I remove the amount modulation, it works as well, but it's not the same. Yeah, and then I don't have modulation. It's just the ambient envelope like this. Low pass filter 24 dB, even though here it doesn't really do anything. Add a bit of drive. Then EQ, getting rid of the low frequency, boosting the high. So then after a while I choose 3 kHz. Usually 3 kHz work well, but this really depends on your synth, obviously. Saturator in medium curve, which gonna add a bit of grit. Bit of reverb, again another EQ. Same reason that when I explained before, it's like I have an EQ, I had some effect, and I feel okay, I need another EQ to reshape my sound now. Like I said, it's a very surgical sound, so I will always do like this. Put the bass in mono. And then add drum burst for the same reason. Glide everything together, reduce the tail of the reverb, add a bit of grit. You can see here I've been a bit more savage with the crunch. But yeah. Alright, Synth 3. Which is again this kind of detuned super saw sound. So here I've used operator, but I think I don't remember, but I think I used my big time synth rack. I will put it in the description, and I just extract the operator preset from it. But basically it's the same idea. You have sawtooth, you see you have 4 sawtooth with operator. They are playing both alongside each other. It's in mono. You can see you have some glide, and how I create the unison with operator is basically by detune each oscillator. So if I bring the fine to 0, you have a basic sound, and then. So now how you detune oscillator, again, no special trick. It really depends what you're looking for. How you detune one or to another is gonna change the feeling. Then everything is going through low pass 24 dB filter. This one I choose the clean. Just automate here for the break. I will come back to it next week. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Then I add some chorus to kind of add a bit of stereo, phase shifting, and excitement to the sound. This actually doesn't do anything. Again, same style of EQ done before. Reduce the low frequency, boost the high frequency. Like I said, it's more sent to be like in the high. And So here you can see I didn't put drum bass, I leave it like that. I think I tried with the drum bass and it didn't work because this one is more like a synth. I wanted to have a long reverb tail, like a more spacious synth. Let's say the first one was more like synth short and sharp synth, rather than this one was more like a long one. So the cool thing is add contrast to the two first one as well. But yeah, and the MIDI patterns, and this time you have D sharp, which is the root, and you have +2 and +1. And then it's playing exactly the same but octave upper. Later on in the track, just to add variation. Now we have Synth 4. So this is a classic sound I like to do as well, this kind of growling sound. Here again, same principle, unison. You have your sawtooth here. And in unison, so you have this super saw type of sound, but you can hear there is something happening with the filter. I like to use the band pass because you can get a kind of growling effect if I push a classic low pass. It's not the same, sounds nice as well, but different. The band pass, you have this growling effect, and what I've done, I've modulated the filter. You can see it was moving, and I use an envelope with a very slow attack. So it makes your sounds move. Then you add your amplitude, you have just a bit of attack to don't be too straightforward in your face. Do not playing is D sharp again. And then some EQ, bass in mono. Major curve to add a bit of bite to your sound. Reverb to put in the space. And drum bass to make it a bit more gritty and powerful. And yeah, that's it for Synth 4. Synth 5. So I created this one to have kind of an alternative to the Synth 4, because originally I had just Synth 4, which was playing more often. Like basically when this one was playing, this one originally was playing as well here, but it was, then Synth 4 was playing too often, so I needed kind of same type of sound, but different, like a type of sound with the same function, but sounding different. So again, the kind of growling sound, and here you can hear there is some modulation. So this time I didn't use the unison, but I have a triangle waveform going through a low pass filter, 24 dB, exactly the same. But you can see the matrix, I have quite some modulation with the envelope 3, which is modulating oscillator 1 warp. So that's what's gonna give all the character to the sound. You can see it moving. And the envelope as well. See, that's the envelope modulating. It's modulating the filter. So without the modulation. So you have both envelope 3 and 2. But it's mainly the envelope 2 with a long attack, which is kind of opening slowly the filter. And yeah, then after same type of EQ, cut the low, boost the high. And you can see what I like to do, if you cut a certain frequency and you boost in the same time, usually you accentuate this growling effect. After it really depends what type of tone you want, but yeah. Makes things louder with saturator. Mixing stereo, but this is a delay plugin that I use as a has effect. You just bring down the feedback, put dry rate 100%, remove the ping pong. You can remove the filter as well and just put in time and like slightly detune the right from the left from 8 to 16 milliseconds, I would say. And then add a bit of reverb. And drum bass to make things louder. And yeah, now moving on to Synth 6. So that's an interesting one as well, because I had a lot of very growling synth and low synth or mid-low synth. I wanted something more very high. This kind of sound of like a whistle a little bit. And this came out from experimentation. But you can see here again in mono with the glide, which is very important, and the unison, because the glide is important because you can see you go from E5 to D sharp 3. So it's like a very big gap between the two notes. But with the glide, you get this nice pitch down modulation. If I remove, obviously it's gonna sound completely different. You have the unison. make it more stereo and more a bit exciting alive. I use this complex waveform just because I was experimenting and I like it. Then again, low pass filter. So I always kind of do the same with a bit of drive. Sometimes I add resonance if I feel too. You can see there is some modulation on the filter. So let's go to matrix and you can see you have a LFO as well, which is acting on the pitch and on the filter, and you're gonna hear. That's what actually gives this kind of whistle effect a little. So very short amount on the pitch and on the frequency. And then after there is another pattern where it goes the other way around, like from low to high. So just after a low cut, saturator to make things louder. And a big reverb. And then finally you have Senso 7. So again, you can see I play a lot with kind of pitch modulated synth. So this one is quite an interesting one as well. So without. And here there is few things. You can see I use the basic shape, but I use the modern modulation. So originally was a sawtooth that I transform with the fold into a weird, more complex waveform. I've done the same with the oscillator 2. It's going through a filter, low pass filter, 24 dB, Moog Prodigy style. And here you can hear there is some modulation, which is with the LFO1. So you have modulation on the pitch, on the warp of both oscillator, and a little bit on the filter. And it's a LFO with a sine, very slow rate, so which means that it's gonna open very slowly until it stops. So if I remove everything and I do one by one, obviously pretty steady, but then I add the LFO modulating the pitch of oscillator 1. And the warp of oscillator 1, so this add movement. So one is modulating the pitch, one is modulating the movement, and I do the same for oscillator 2. Alright, and then the filter. Yeah, and then EQ, saturation, and a long reverb. Here again, I didn't done the drum bass trick because it was working better without. And again, I really wanted this long sparse effect, like the effect to stay a little bit longer. So yeah, then after the way they play, they kind of answer to each other. I will come back to this more like in detail next week, but yeah. And then you have the second part where you. Here, this one is playing A sharp too, but you have as well some lower notes to add a bit of variation, you know. Alright, and that's it for the synth. Now let's talk about the SFX. I have this SFX that I've basically made from this synth. So if I go there, you can see it's exactly the same preset. One of the things I changed here, the LFO, the rate is at 0.0.2, which is an even slower rate than here, which was 0.04. But otherwise, it's exactly the same patch. And this, I slower the rate, so this way I have a slower progression, and I decide to use for the break, which is perfect. So you have this very rising, which attention for the break. Go up, and then it go down. So for the Senso 7, I basically cut the MIDI clip so you didn't have the pitch going down after the raise. Here I've left it because here is like the final break, so basically it's going up on the final break, and then when you drop sound, the pitch is going down. And this allows to attention during the break. I'm using on the other break as well. But it's not going down, it's just going up, and I stop when it's going down. And yeah, the process is exactly the same. I'm not gonna talk about it. I just have some gain automation to kind of fade out the sound, but yeah. add to build the tension. This is something I love to do. Recycling sound is basically taking a sound that you already create for your track, duplicate your track, and kind of tweak the sound to make it a new one and having a secondary function. And usually it works well because obviously you use a sound that already fit well the mix, so this next one's gonna fit well, and it's allowed you to add variation, add something new, and being sure that fits the track. All right, then you have this SFX noise. So this is pretty easy. It's just operator which is playing some basic white noise. And then the idea is to modulate this white noise to have a sweeping effect. So I use it again here for the build-up to have a nice, to rise the tension. So here the sound, the source stayed the same. I just made some process to make the white noise sound the way I like. So overdrive, trying to make it brighter, and here the trick is this EQ. You can see you have this very high EQ here. I'm sweeping this, so this way is creating a sweeping effect. So you could do like some people, they do like this as well with the high pass filter, but you kind of lose a little bit of the body. So I rather use like this. And for the last break, I use it as well to go down. So it's going up and then it go back down. Now I have two noise SFX which are more like kind of impact rather than modulated. So the first one sound like this, and the second one sound like this. So to make this kind of sound, it's very easy. You just use elements from your own track. So for example, here I use the snare for this one, and you put into a lot of reverb with a long tail, big amount of dry wet, and you just freeze flatten, and you will have basically something like that. You just maybe cut, you just need to cut the attack, and then you can, if you click here on, you can reverse basically your sample, and you will have something like this. And I've done the same. Usually I use the hi-hat. Here I use this noise send to do it, but I've done the same one-shot sound, put into a lot of reverb, reverse, and that's helped the transition. And then I just add a bit of EQ and reverb to make it fit the track better, and the reverb is to make the effect last a little bit longer. So that's it for all of the elements. Next week I will talk about more the arrangement, the automation, variation, a bit more in detail. I will talk about the mix down. I have some master effect here, and I will talk about the mixing and the mastering as well. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't want to miss part 2 next week. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.